What if I told you the deadliest weapon on the battlefield wasn't a tank, but your own pet? From Roman beasts wearing iron armor to Soviet dogs strapped with live bombs, history has a dark secret. Today on Dr.DogPedia, we're exposing the forgotten files of canine warfare. Why did the Soviets starve 40,000 dogs to turn them into suicide machines? And did it actually work? The answer will break your heart. You need to see this. Ancient origins of canine warfare. You might think of your dog as a couch potato, but for thousands of years, their ancestors were frontline soldiers. Before we had drones or tanks, we had something much more primal: the war dog. History is filled with forgotten jobs, but few are as terrifying as this one. I've always found it fascinating, and a little disturbing, how quickly humans learned to weaponize nature. We didn't just want a companion, we wanted a killer. According to historical records, ancient civilizations didn't just bring dogs to watch the camp, they sent them to break the enemy's spirit. It's estimated that dogs have been used in warfare for over 2,500 years. That is a long history of blood and loyalty. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Early commanders viewed these animals not as living beings, but as expendable biological weapons. If you think that's harsh, just wait until you hear what the Romans did. It makes modern military tactics look tame by quote. Comparison. Rome's armored Molossus legions. Imagine standing on a battlefield, shield in hand, and suddenly, a beast the size of a lion charges at you. This was the Roman Molossus. These weren't your average pets. They were massive, muscular ancestors of the modern Mastiff, bred specifically for violence. The Romans were geniuses at warfare, and they knew that fear was just as deadly as a sword. Here is the part that blows my mind. They didn't just send the dogs in naked, they forged custom iron armor for them. Historical accounts describe these dogs wearing spiked collars and mail coats, designed to rip through enemy cavalry horses. We see this type of social proof in ancient art and statues that have survived centuries. Stone carvings of massive dogs standing proudly alongside legionaries. It validates that this wasn't a myth. It was standard operating procedure. But here's the kicker. As scary as a Roman war dog was, at least it had a fighting chance. It could bite. It could run. And if it survived, it was fed. But thousands of years later, humanity decided that using a dog to kill wasn't enough. We decided to use them to die. When loyalty becomes a weapon. There is a saying that a dog is the only thing on earth that loves you more than he loves himself. That loyalty is beautiful in a family home, but on a battlefield, it is a liability. I honestly struggle with this part of history because it takes the purest thing about a dog, its desire to please, and twists it into something dark. Military psychologists and trainers have long understood that working dogs don't understand politics. They only understand the bond with their handler. This setup of trust is crucial. In modern terms, we see police dogs protecting their handlers daily. It's heroic. But what if that handler betrays that trust? What if the command isn't attack, but stay? You might feel a bit of discomfort realizing this, but your dog would likely walk into fire if you asked it to. And in the 20th century, that is exactly what happened. The transition from the Roman gladiator dog to the modern era brought a new, horrific invention. World War II's darkest experiment. By 1941, the world was on fire. The Nazis were pushing deep into Soviet territory, and the Red Army was desperate. They didn't have enough guns. They didn't have enough tanks. But they had plenty of dogs. This brings us to one of the most controversial chapters in military history: the Soviet anti-tank dog. The idea sounds like something out of a nightmare or a plot twist in a horror movie. Instead of fighting alongside the soldiers, these dogs were designed to be the weapon itself. Historians estimate that the Soviet Union enlisted roughly 40,000 dogs for various tasks during the war. That is a staggering number. 40,000 lives drafted into a war they couldn't comprehend. But here's the thing they don't usually tell you in history class. The program wasn't just about aggression. It was about engineering a suicide machine using a living creature. And the way they achieved this wasn't through loyalty training, it was through starvation. Inside the Soviet anti-tank units. Let's look at the mechanics of this, because the engineering is as tragic as it is clever. The Soviets strapped explosive mines to the dogs using specialized harnesses. I remember seeing diagrams of these harnesses in a military archive, and it gave me chills. It wasn't makeshift, it was mass-produced. The device had a simple lever. When the dog crawled under the enemy tank, where the armor was thinnest, the lever would hit the chassis and detonate the mine. This is a classic example of a karma twist gone wrong, where an innocent creature bears the ultimate conflict for human conflict. You have to wonder about the soldiers handling these dogs. Did they detach themselves emotionally, or did they cry when they let the leash go? Reports from the Eastern Front suggest it was a mix of both. But the real horror wasn't the explosion, it was the preparation. Training dogs to hunt tanks. How do you make a dog run toward a noisy, terrifying metal monster? You don't use treats, you use survival instinct. The training was brutal. The Soviets would starve the dogs for days. Then they would place food directly under a tank. It's simple Pavlovian conditioning. The dog learns. I am hungry, food is under the tank. I must go to the tank to survive. I find this to be the most irony twist of the whole story. The dog thinks it is running toward sustenance, toward life. In reality, it is running toward death. Military records from the era show that this worked in training. The dogs were efficient. They were fast, low to the ground, and hard to shoot. But field tests are different from reality. And this is where the plan fell apart in the most tragic way possible. The heartbreaking truth of suicide missions. On the actual battlefield, chaos rules. There is smoke, gunfire, and screaming. But there was one specific detail the Soviet engineers missed, a fatal flaw in their logic. Soviet tanks ran on diesel. German tanks ran on gasoline. When the dogs were released in the heat of battle, they sniffed the air. They didn't smell the gasoline-fueled German tanks they were supposed to destroy. They smelled the diesel fuel they had trained with. So, in a horrific reversal twist, the dogs often turned around and ran back toward the Soviet lines, toward the familiar smell of their own tanks. The result was catastrophic. The dogs, trying to return to their masters for food and safety, ended up destroying their own side's equipment. It was a heartbreaking failure. From the armored Molossus of Rome to the tragic anti-tank dogs of World War II, the history of war dogs is a testament to their loyalty and our ruthlessness. It leaves us with a heavy question. When we say man's best friend, do we really deserve that title? From armor-clad heroes to tragic martyrs, the history of war dogs proves loyalty is a double-edged sword. If this story moved you, smash that like button and subscribe to Dr.DogPedia. Which dark secret should we dig up next? Let me know below. See you in the next one!